Alright, so for our Red Queen hypothesis assignment, we did Nikon versus Canon, Augustus Gascons.
I'm Parker Release.
And I'm Cam Donnelly. So, what is the Red Queen hypothesis? It is an evolutionary hypothesis which proposes that organisms must constantly adapt, evolve, and proliferate to gain reproductive advantage, but also simply to survive while pitted against ever-evolving opposing organisms in an ever-changing environment.
So this is a graph that we have that just shows the major brands that are in the camera industry, and it shows it by popularity, and we put market share on there just to show who those top competitors are. So Canon is 33%, it's the highest, Nikon with 26%, and then Sony at 15%. A lot of people do know of Sony, but not a lot of people necessarily know of Fujifilm and Olympus and Pentax, and people obviously know of Panasonic as well, but the main two competitors are Canon and Nikon, and that's why we focused on them.
So a little brief history of the Nikon. In 1917, three of Japan's leading optical manufacturers merged to form Nippon Kogaku. In 1918, the research on manufacturing optical glass began. And then after the World War II in 1945, there was a focus on cameras, microscopes, binoculars, surveying instruments, and measuring instruments. And then in 1950, the New York Times introduced the features of the Nikon cameras and their lenses. And then in 1953, the company established itself in the United States. And then in 2015, they actually opened up a museum.
And then the reason that we put the opening of the museum was just because we found that it was really interesting that they're a company that has done so well, and that they're able to open a museum and showcase all their products and things that they've done back since 1917, and that they're still doing research, and they're still trying to evolve and continue to innovate in their company.
So, a brief history of the Canon. 1933, their laboratory was founded to do research in quality cameras. 1935, the company filed for registration of the Canon trademark. They became Canon Camera Company Incorporated, and then they opened a branch in New York. And then they actually, not many people know this, they actually made the world's first 10-key calculator. And then in 1969, they broke into the U.S. television broadcast, and then they made the world's first SLR camera. Then they released the first EOS camera, and then 1995, they became a main supporter of the Yellowstone National Park research. And then today, 2014, they used the "See the Impossible" slogan.
So now we're going to go into a little bit of what makes these companies competitors. And then so first is the modeling styles. There's three levels. There's the consumer level, the advanced level, and the professional level. In the consumer level, everything in the advanced and professional levels, both Nikon and Canon use both the letter D's in their products. But in the consumer level, Canon uses the word Rebel to show their consumer line, and Nikon still uses the D at the beginning. And then so for the advanced level and the professional level, you can see that Nikon uses the D in the beginning and Canon uses the D at the end. And a lot of times, people who know this industry, they don't even say EOS or anything like that. They usually just, for Canon, they would say 80D. So it can get very confusing for people who know these cameras very well, because a lot of times they'll just say D90 or 80D, and it can get very confusing. And then, so timing of the releases, this is two products that Nikon released and that Canon released. Nikon released their Nikon D5, which is in the professionals level, and this was in March of 2016. And then Canon, which is, this product is also in the professional levels for them. They released that in April 2016, so this just kind of shows how they're competing with one another and how Canon had to basically release a product to keep up with Nikon. And then so pricing strategy, this really speaks for itself. At the consumer level, and these three products right here too, it goes up. It goes consumer level, advanced level, professional level. Consumer level, they're at the same exact price point, $400 to $750. At the advanced level, Nikon is at $1,100 to $1,300. and Canon is at 1,000 to 1,200. But for both of those, there's only a $200 price difference, so there really isn't that much variation in their prices in the advanced levels. And then same thing for the professional levels. There's a $4,500 price difference in Nikon, and then in Canon there's a $4,600 price difference, so there really isn't too much change in the overall prices of these products.
All right, now, does anyone here own a Nikon or Canon DSLR? You? All right, cool. So I'm just going to walk through some of the features. Now, there's a bunch of features on cameras, like that you can go into like everything from the image sensing, like go into the color changing, the special effects that come in built into the cameras. But I just limited to the ones that are really important that people actually look for when they're purchasing a camera. And you can see for Nikon in the consumer level and Canon in the consumer level, you have about 18 megapixels usually, and this is a broad range. There's a bunch of consumer level and entry level, advanced level, professional level cameras. So this is pretty much just an average of those cameras. So like I said, 18 megapixels. You have about 3 to a 4 image processing speed, 6400 ISO. ISO stands for, well, basically what it is it's the ability to perform well in low light or high light, depending on what side of the ISO you're on. Low ISO performs well in low light. And then you have pretty much all of the cameras in the consumer, advanced, and professional for both brands are able to make videos in 1080p, and except in the professional, some cameras are actually able to use 4K HD now. But then you also have the 3-inch vari-angled LCD screen, which basically vari-angled means it can pop out and you can like swivel it around so that you can, like, if you're taking a low shot, you can still look at your picture through the live view. But those get rid the professional levels in both brands get rid of the vari-angled LCD screen. Instead, they just have the standard one that's still stuck in the camera, but they increase the size to 3.2. But really, like, you can see 20 megapixels, 20 megapixels, 24 megapixels, 21, 51 ISO, 51 200. Like, they're really these, like, almost identical when you break it down. And then these are to just go off the lenses themselves. Other than like color and such, you can really see that there's, like, especially like in these sections, there's not much of a difference that you could tell. Like, if someone were to just throw you a lens and it didn't have any brand name on it, you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a Canon or a Nikon, or Nikkor is the lenses for Nikon. And yeah, this isn't even all the lenses that are available. And just to break down some of the lenses in their actual focal ranges, as you can see, this slide pretty much speaks for itself. They're almost identical in everything. When you're using telephoto lenses, you really don't need a minimum focal range that low because you're usually taking a picture of something far away. And then when you get into the primes, you're just, prime means that there's no changing of the zoom. You can't zoom out, you can't zoom in. It stays at that focal length. So you can see 24 millimeter, they come out with 24 millimeter. They got a 35 millimeter, they have a 35 millimeter. And it's the same with the standard zooms. There's a little bit of difference in the minimal focal range, but to the extent they're pretty much exactly the same. And so we have a little game for you guys to play a little bit if you guys want to participate. We're going to show you pictures of cameras with their brands taken off, and we're going to ask you whether they're a Canon or a Nikon. So who thinks that this is a Nikon? Just raise your hand. Who thinks it's a Canon? This one? Nikon? Canon? Nikon or Canon? Nikon or Canon? Yeah, yep. So on this last one, the last one's kind of a loaded question. I don't know if you guys, most of you probably caught on. And if you guessed wrong on the first one, you guessed wrong on the third one because of the red mark. That's the only real indication for a Nikon Nikon camera. This last one is actually a Nikon, but I removed the little red part to see. You can just see that little thing is the only identification for an actual Nikon camera from being different from a Canon. And those are our references, and that's our presentation.